Karoline Leavitt's sharp rebuttal exposed flaws in Jasmine Crockett's anti-Trump narrative in a way that captured not only the attention of the audience present, but also the wider political spectrum across the country. Crockett, known for her fiery style and willingness to take strong stances against former President Donald Trump, had made a series of remarks intended to cast Trump in a negative light. Her words, however, fell short when Leavitt stepped in with precision, confidence, and a tone that immediately shifted the energy in the room. Rather than responding with defensive platitudes or vague ideological retorts, Leavitt went directly to the substance of Crockett's claims, highlighting inconsistencies, exaggerations, and outright misrepresentations in a manner that seemed to dismantle Crockett's talking points piece by piece. The exchange revealed not just a clash of political views, but a demonstration of skill in argumentation, with Leavitt proving that she could hold her ground against a seasoned Democratic figure while simultaneously appealing to a broader audience that values facts over rhetoric. When Crockett attempted to frame Trump as the embodiment of chaos and corruption, Leavitt countered by pointing to tangible achievements during his administration that cannot be easily dismissed. She cited strong economic growth before the pandemic, record low unemployment rates, and a tough foreign policy stance that, according to her, positioned America as a leader on the world stage. By bringing up these points, Leavitt immediately shifted the discussion from abstract criticism to measurable results, forcing Crockett's broad generalizations into a narrower, more fact-based conversation where her claims appeared weaker. This approach was particularly effective because it not only defended Trump but also reframed the conversation around outcomes rather than rhetoric, giving the audience a clearer lens through which to evaluate the arguments being made. Leavitt's rebuttal also carried weight because she avoided personal attacks and instead focused on dismantling Crockett's narrative with sharp reasoning. While Crockett relied heavily on emotionally charged language, Leavitt brought in specifics and clarity, creating a contrast that made her arguments resonate more powerfully. For instance, when Crockett tried to paint Trump as an authoritarian figure with no respect for democratic institutions, Leavitt reminded the audience of Trump's repeated calls for transparency in government, his push against entrenched bureaucratic power, and his emphasis on putting American citizens first. These counterpoints directly undercut the sweeping generalizations Crockett was leaning on, and in doing so, Leavitt exposed the fragility of the arguments being presented. The audience could see in real time how the emotional framing was no match for structured, evidence-based rebuttals. Another layer of Leavitt's success in this exchange came from her ability to maintain composure and confidence under pressure. Crockett's strategy often involves raising her voice, amplifying passion, and appealing to emotion as a means to dominate the discussion. But Leavitt refused to be rattled or distracted by theatrics. Her steady tone, controlled delivery, and sharp timing allowed her responses to land with greater impact. Rather than escalating the confrontation into a shouting match, she positioned herself as calm, collected, and firmly in control of the narrative. This demeanor amplified the strength of her rebuttals because it contrasted so starkly with Crockett's more heated style, and it made the flaws in Crockett's arguments stand out even more. Leavitt also made use of one of the most effective tools in political debate, turning an opponent's words against them. When Crockett accused Trump of dividing America, Leavitt swiftly pointed out that such rhetoric itself is divisive, designed not to unify but to demonize millions of voters who continue to support the former president. By highlighting this hypocrisy, she forced Crockett into an uncomfortable position, revealing that the very critique she leveled against Trump could be equally applied to her own words. This tactic not only exposed a contradiction but also resonated with independent viewers who are often frustrated with the tendency of politicians to dismiss or vilify large segments of the population. In that moment, Leavitt's rebuttal didn't just defend Trump. It defended the dignity of his supporters, framing them as Americans with legitimate concerns rather than as caricatures of extremism. The exposure of flaws in Crockett's narrative went beyond individual counterpoints. It created a broader theme that Crockett's criticisms lacked depth and credibility when examined closely. Leavitt demonstrated that while it is easy to hurl accusations at Trump, it is far more difficult to substantiate them when faced with concrete examples and data. This broader pattern became clear as the exchange went on. Each time Crockett attempted to escalate her attacks, Leavitt calmly provided a counterpoint that redirected the conversation toward verifiable reality. The cumulative effect was one of authority and strength, leaving Crockett's arguments looking increasingly hollow and reactive. Leavitt's ability to expose flaws also connected to her deeper understanding of how Trump's base perceives political discourse. By standing firm and delivering precise rebuttals, she not only challenged Crockett's claims, but also validated the perspectives of millions who feel Trump is unfairly targeted by political elites and media narratives. This alignment with the sentiments of the Republican base gave her words even more impact, showing that she wasn't just arguing for the sake of argument, but articulating a defense that echoed the frustrations of everyday Americans who believe their voices are often ignored. Through this clash, Leavitt managed to project herself as more than just a defender of Trump. She positioned herself as a skilled communicator capable of dismantling opposition narratives with clarity and composure. This was not simply about defending one man. It was about confronting the broader pattern of misrepresentation and bias often directed at conservative figures. In exposing the weaknesses in Crockett's anti-Trump remarks, Leavitt underscored her own ability to rise as a prominent voice in the conservative movement, demonstrating that she could hold her own in the toughest of political battles and leaving a lasting impression on both supporters and critics alike. The clash underscored the deep partisan divide and Trump's lasting influence in American politics, reflecting a political environment that has grown increasingly polarized over the years. When Karoline Leavitt and Jasmine Crockett faced off over remarks about Donald Trump, what emerged was not just a disagreement between two individuals, but a microcosm of the broader ideological battle shaping the nation. Crockett, speaking from a Democratic perspective, sought to portray Trump as a divisive and damaging figure whose legacy continues to undermine democratic norms. Leavitt, on the other hand, embodied the passionate defense of Trump that remains powerful among Republicans, countering that his policies, leadership, and boldness were what America needed. The clash highlighted how discussions around Trump are rarely neutral or detached. They quickly become emotionally charged and deeply rooted in identity, values, and competing visions for the country. One of the clearest signs of the divide came in the way each side framed the same events and policies. Crockett emphasized narratives of corruption, chaos, and danger, often painting Trump as someone who destabilized institutions and eroded unity. Leavitt countered by reframing these same points as evidence of Trump's willingness to challenge the status quo, confront entrenched power structures, and disrupt a complacent political system. What Democrats see as recklessness, Republicans often view as strength, and this disconnect was on full display in the exchange. It underscored that Americans are not only divided over Trump himself, but over the interpretation of his presidency, his actions, and his legacy. This division remains so entrenched that even years after his time in office, Trump still dominates political discourse, serving as a litmus test for loyalty, ideology, and vision. The encounter also revealed how Trump's influence persists not only in policy discussions, but also in political style and strategy. Crockett's approach of using strong language and dramatic accusations is emblematic of how Democrats often campaign against Trump, framing him as an existential threat. Leavitt mirrored the combative, unapologetic style Trump himself popularized, refusing to back down and instead turning attacks into opportunities to highlight her own strength and conviction. This stylistic clash mirrors the broader cultural divide. One side sees itself as the defender of institutions against chaos, while the other views itself as the voice of ordinary Americans fighting back against entrenched elites. In this sense, Trump's influence is not just about policies he implemented, but about the combative political culture he ushered in, one that continues to shape how both sides communicate and clash with each other. The deep partisan divide was further illustrated by how each woman's words resonated with her base. Crockett's criticisms of Trump played directly to Democrats who remain deeply opposed to his return to power and who see him as a symbol of regression. Her arguments reinforced existing beliefs and fueled a sense of urgency among her supporters to resist any resurgence of Trump's political career. Leavitt's defense of Trump, however, tapped into the enduring loyalty of his Republican base, who view attacks against him as not just political disagreements. but as attempts to silence and delegitimize their voices. By standing firmly in Trump's corner, Leavitt reinforced the emotional bond between Trump's defenders and their shared sense of being under siege by the political establishment and media narratives. Another striking element of the divide is how Trump continues to overshadow other issues in American politics. Despite the vast array of challenges the nation faces, from economic concerns to international conflicts, debates like this one quickly return to Trump as the central figure. This demonstrates his lasting grip on the political imagination of both parties. For Democrats like Crockett, Trump remains the rallying point to mobilize opposition, while for Republicans like Leavitt, he serves as both a symbol of defiance and a reminder of the successes they attribute to his leadership. The fact that even a single remark about him can spark such intense exchanges is evidence of his enduring significance, a phenomenon rarely seen with former presidents. The clash also underscored how Trump's influence forces politicians on both sides to define themselves in relation to him. Crockett's political energy in this moment was shaped by opposition to Trump, a stance that resonates with her base, but also risks being perceived as excessively negative if not balanced with constructive proposals. Leavitt, conversely, strengthened her identity as a defender of Trump, which not only aligns her with the Republican base, but also signals her willingness to fight against what she portrays as unfair attacks from the left. This dynamic illustrates how Trump acts as a gravitational force, pulling both allies and opponents into a constant cycle of defense and critique, making it nearly impossible for any political discussion to exist in isolation from his shadow. The intensity of the divide also raises questions about the future of political discourse in America. The Leavitt-Crockett exchange exemplifies how difficult it has become for politicians to find common ground, as even basic facts are interpreted through the lens of partisan loyalty. This polarization is not simply a matter of differing opinions. It is a clash of fundamentally different worldviews, with Trump serving as the lightning rod around which these worldviews crystallize. One side views him as a threat to democracy, while the other views him as the champion of forgotten Americans. The clash made it clear that these opposing narratives are not likely to be reconciled anytime soon, as they reflect broader cultural, social, and ideological rifts that extend far beyond individual debates. Leavitt's presence in the debate also highlighted how Trump's influence continues to shape the Republican Party's future. By aligning herself closely with him, she positioned herself as part of the next generation of leaders willing to carry forward his style, his message, and his defiance of the establishment. Crockett's attacks against Trump, meanwhile, reflected the Democratic strategy of ensuring he remains a central figure in their campaign messaging, rallying their base by keeping him as the symbol of what they stand against. Both approaches reflect the reality that Trump's presence looms so large that politicians on both sides find political value in centering their arguments around him, even when discussing broader themes. Through this clash, the deep partisan divide became impossible to ignore. Trump's lasting influence was not only evident in the arguments themselves, but also in the emotional energy that fueled them, showing that he remains one of the most polarizing and defining figures in modern American politics.